This review is dedicated to the memory of Margot Kidder, John Saxon, Olivia Hussey, Bob Clark, and Levi. Let's revisit Black Christmas 1974.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Jess! Jess! Get up! And don't go up there.
Black Christmas stars Olivia Hussey, John Saxon, Margot Kidder, and is directed by the late Bob Clark. What's up, guys? Welcome to Black Christmas Revisited. First off, I just want to thank each and every one of you for all the great and kind comments in my last video, the hardest video I've ever had to make about the passing of Levi. And I was going to just scrap Black Christmas 1974 until next Christmas. I just didn't think I had it in me to get it out before Christmas Day. You know what? I decided this was Levi's last movie that he ever watched with me. And the little guy has watched so many movies, hundreds of movies with me. He would sit next to me when I would watch pretty much anything. And the morning that he passed away, he watched the original Black Christmas with me. And you know what? I'm happy that the little guy got to watch, probably one of the greatest horror films ever created. So at least there's some comfort there. I even wore my Levi t-shirt. Yeah, it actually has Levi on the top of the Drumdums logo. You can't really, it's tiny. It's tiny. My wife had that designed for me. So, it's kind of bittersweet now in hindsight that I have a t-shirt with Levi on the top of the Drumdums logo. It's really, really cool. But also just kind of reflecting on this movie, and we've lost so many great talents from this movie. The late Bob Clark, who directed this. Olivia Hussey died last year on December 27th, 2 days after Christmas. And it was the 50th anniversary of this movie. So I think it's fitting to dedicate this to her as well. That one hit me really hard, I remember last year. Just because Olivia Hussey, to me, she's sort of the unsung final girl. She's horror royalty as far as I'm concerned. And after giving this a fresh watch, I've watched it so many times, but it seems like every time I watch Black Christmas, I get something new and I gain a new appreciation for the movie, even though it is one of my all-time favorite films. The character of Jess is a really well-written character. She's smart. She's a strong woman without having to use her muscles, for lack of a better word. She's not what you would call a physical force of a final girl. She's quite the opposite, actually. She's very, very feminine. And a key plot point in this movie is her wanting to have an abortion.
I want to talk to you tonight.
There's nothing to discuss, Peter.
Which is quite crazy if you think about 1974. A character wanting to have an abortion in a slasher movie, a little slasher movie. It's just not something you saw that much back then. And I think that would kind of be par for the course these days. We have strong women in movies, and it feels like we try to oversell it these days, whereas back then there was just much more nuance to it. And I think Jess beautifully orchestrated that. This movie's not telling you to be for or against abortion. It's just about a woman's right. And I thought that was really cool. And I think if this movie came out today, it would be called woke, okay? And I don't mean that in a bad way or a good way. It just is what it is. And, maybe I'm wrong on that. You guys will let me know in the comments, okay? That's considered a bad word these days when originally woke wasn't supposed to be a bad word. But that's a whole nother discussion. We won't get into that. Let's just talk about this wonderful movie, Black Christmas. I did the first review on this probably 10 years ago, a decade ago. Back then, I rarely ever go back and watch any of my reviews. I haven't watched that review since it first came out, but I've seen a lot of you guys commenting on it. I do remember pouring my heart out into that review, though, because I love the movie so much, loved it even back then. So I don't want to regurgitate that review and touch on all the same things, but I'm sure I'll probably expand on some of the ideas I had in that review. So first off, let's give you a plot synopsis, a quick plot synopsis on the original Black Christmas. It's this group of sorority sisters. I believe it's Christmas Eve, and they're in this house. And I love the beginning of this movie, how you see the killer's point of view. You see Billy's point of view, and he has escaped from somewhere, and he's going up to the top of the house, the attic, via this like ladder that's installed on the side, or it might have been lattice, something like that. But yeah, and you see the camera operator's point of view. You see his hands going up, and guys, this is very similar to the original Halloween. You know, that opening shot where it's all the killer's point of view. And I believe this was before the use of the Steadicam. I don't think they used Steadicam, but the camera operator, I can't remember his name, but he actually created that rig just for that specific shot. And basically what it was this harness, this like metal harness that like wrapped over your shoulders, and it had the camera like right on front. Sort of reminded me of when I was in the band and I would carry like the rototoms, and they had like a similar harness, and you could actually like push the harness forward so you could kind of raise the drums up. Same thing here. And when he's going up there, he literally just pushes that harness up. So you see the point of view of the killer looking up to the attic. And so he just crawls in the attic, and he just sits in there for the rest of the movie. But there's a lot of other stuff going on during this movie. I think Claire being the first thing, played by Lynn Griffin, who is a wonderful character. She's the first victim. And this is probably the most iconic kill in slasher history. One of the most iconic, anyway. It's the picture that you constantly see.
Who is it?
When you look up Black Christmas, Lynn Griffin with plastic over her head and just, you know, in a rocking chair in the attic. Also, that iconic shot with the cat licking her face. By the way, I have not bought the 4K yet. I need to, but I love this Shout Factory edition. And it actually has like the bonus disc. I'll show it to you guys real quick. This is, I forgot that this came with this. I remember they sent this extra disc, and it was like, I think there was like an audio issue or something like that. So they had to do like a recall or something, and they sent like an extra disc. And it's the feature film. You know, it's the disc 1. But I think this might have like, it might be missing the mono. Like this new disc that they sent contains the mono. Because I watched it in with the original mono track. And I love the mono track to this movie, much like the original Halloween. I'm no like audio video tech guru, although I like the best quality, you know, but I can't get into like the minutia of a transfer. All I can go off is my own ears and my own eyes. And I love the sound of the mono track. But also, you guys might remember the initial release of this. Actually, you could see Billy's face. They had, I don't know why they did this, but they actually showed Billy's face. You guys might help me in the comments. Did they actually release a version that actually had that on the slipcover? Because I know they had to quickly change that because there was an outcry. Like the fans were pissed. Like, you do not show Billy's face, okay? The director never showed Billy's face in the original movie. All you saw was his eye. That they should honor that with this cover. So why in the hell they made the bonehead move to actually show Billy's face was stupid. But I wonder, I'll have to look and see if there's an actual version of that actually shows his face. But before Claire gets killed, we see the shot of the sorority sisters with Barb, played by Margot Kidder, who is one of the most unique side characters I've ever seen. You know, Bob Clark, he wrote all these women to have kind of their own story, their own personality, but they were all strong women. You know, they weren't just superficial like dingbats. No. And Barb is really the comic relief of this movie. She seems to be intoxicated throughout most of the movie, which is sort of the reason that she ends up getting killed, because she has to go to bed early because she is drunk But she has some really funny scenes in here too.
They did 3 days, 24 hours a day. Boom, boom, boom.
But she picks up the phone and starts talking to Billy and just kind of trolling back at him. And the girls are getting a kick out of it, and it's really funny.
Listen, you pervert, why don't you go over to Lamb McCoy? They could use a little of this.
Big cunt. You want my fat cock too?
Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and...
But some of the language that Billy uses on these girls, even for today's standards, it's pretty like grating, disgusting type stuff. But for some reason, I guess in the context of this movie and the fact that everything else around this, to me, it just feels like a high-class slasher. There's just something about the original Black Christmas that doesn't feel like low-budget grindhouse, even though the budget was probably pretty low. There's just an air of class about the movie, which ironically has the killer that has just the really disgusting, offensive language in nature. So then a good portion of the movie after this is them actually searching for Claire. Claire's father reaches out to the local police department, and this is how John Saxon ends up coming into the picture. John Saxon, at this point in his career, he didn't age. I swear, for like 30 years, the guy looked exactly the same. It was really, really strange. And John Saxon wasn't originally supposed to play that character. It was another guy that was going to play the character, but he happened to be too old, and he was like slipping into dementia. And he got pretty far into the process too, and eventually they had to fire him, and they had to pull in John Saxon like right at the last minute, and he flies in at like 2 o'clock in the morning and shows up. And for the first shot, it is freezing outside. And you could tell, that's one thing I love about this movie, is it feels cold. When you watch it, kind of like The Thing, you know that those actors are in the thick of it. There's no like CGI green screen behind them. They are literally freezing to death. And the shot that he had to come on at 2 o'clock in the morning, it looks like it's like 10 below zero because they shot this movie in Canada. But what's interesting about this movie too is like there's almost like unnecessary backstory, but you know, it just goes to show the detail that Bob Clark put into this story, because there's this 13-year-old girl that's missing as well. And we don't know if it's actually Billy that killed her because they never really say it. She just happens to be missing. They tie her missing with Claire's missing. They put them together. Now, I'd like to shift gears and talk about Billy a little more in this movie, because I'm glad I put on the subtitles, because when you hear this obscene language over the telephone, it's not just random talk. There's actually a story there if you really listen to it, and that's where you hear him talking about Agnes, where's Agnes? And if you never had seen the 2006 movie, which goes much further into that storyline, it kind of leaves it up for the viewer to form their own story around Agnes. You know, they don't lay everything out. It's more of an ambiguous type of story. They just give you kind of the bare bones of it. And I think you can sort of tell there is a familial relationship, maybe an incestuous relationship with Agnes. But again, it sort of leaves it up to the viewer to kind of put all those pieces together. But there is one line in the movie where the character Peter, who is, prime suspect number 1 in this movie, he's the big red herring. But there is one line that he has in the movie that is the exact same phrase as Billy says over the phone, and that's what really implicates him.
Just like having a wart removed.
Something to do with "you can't just remove me like a wart," where he's talking about Agnes, the baby. So Billy's talking about a baby, but also you have Jess being pregnant and Peter not wanting to get rid of the child. He wants to raise the child. But when Peter becomes a suspect, there is an alibi that is presented later in the movie where Jess realizes it can't be Peter because Peter was with me in the house when I was getting the calls. But then the big hook in this movie, and this predates a certain other movie that has this same hook, is the killer being in the house. You have the telephone guy that's constantly having to go back and forth, and they tell Jess, keep him on the line as long as you can. So it just adds another level of tension to the movie. It's like a race to find out if the killer is Peter, or if not, who is the killer, where is he at? And I wonder if audiences, when they saw this movie back in the day, was it that much of a mystery to them? Because they do show Billy climbing up into the attic at the very beginning of the movie. So is it set up for the audience to know what's going on and it's the actual characters in the movie that don't know? I just love the ambiguity of this movie. Bob Clark only gives you just enough of everything. And I think he presents a lot of like red herrings and story beats. Like one of the red herrings also being Claire's boyfriend. Because there's one shot that nobody ever talks about where Claire's boyfriend is sitting on a bench in front of the house. And it's just a very ominous scene. And it sort of sets up like, ooh, could he be the killer? But one thing we all know is Billy is clearly insane. He is out of his mind. Bob Clark was really protective of the character of Billy. He didn't want the audience to see him throughout the entire movie. It was almost like an experiment. Can I get away with this? Can I get away with not showing the killer? Because every movie, no matter being like European, giallo movies or American films, you got to show the killer. There's got to be a big reveal at the end of the movie. And Bob Clark was like, no, we're not going to do that. And I think that's one reason why this movie was almost resurrected in the 90s. And one reason being is Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino being such a massive fan of Black Christmas. But not ever seeing Billy, I think, makes this movie that much more scary. Like the scene where he kills Barb, she's passed out drunk. And you can hear Billy mention Agnes when he is actually straddling above her and he kills her with the glass ornament. This movie doesn't depend on constantly showing kills. This is much more an exercise in tension. I'd say probably just as much as the original Halloween. And I know we always mention Halloween with this movie. There's that story of John Carpenter being highly influenced by Black Christmas, but then John Carpenter recently was asked this and he denies it. And I'm not saying he's wrong, but you can definitely see the influence there. This is a movie that is heavily based on tension and doesn't depend on kills. It's more story-centric, and there's just a very sinister vibe to it. So jumping into the last act, and by the time you actually have the showdown, which it's not even that long of a showdown, I think it's just orchestrated beautifully. It's as long as it needs to be, but it's such an iconic scene when you have the telephone guy. He finally gets a hold of Jess, and Jess is on the phone with him, and he's like, the killer is in the house. The killer is in the house, which 5 years later you would have When a Stranger Calls. But this movie did it first, and it did it, I think, even better because of how the scene plays out.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Yes!
You have the deputy, who's also, the fellatio guy, the doofus. He's telling Jess, just listen to me, get out of the house. So he's telling her, you are in danger. You have to get out of the house. If you want to save yourself, you need to leave that house. This is the reason why Jess is such an unsung hero in terms of Final Girls, because she knows she's in danger.
Phil! Bob! Please answer me! Please answer me!
But she decides to go upstairs because she wants to save Barb and she wants to save Phil, played by Andrew Martin. And so she gets up there, she opens the door, and she sees both of them killed. Phil was an off-screen kill, but it didn't matter. Because I think if you showed the kill, then that reveal would not have been as impactful. This is a great lesson in putting a script together, and sometimes the sum ends up being much greater if you subtract a few things. Bob Clark was a freaking genius with this movie. And then having Billy not showing his face, but you just hear him going out of his mind, screaming. The edits are perfect where you see like his hand between the railing. Everything is edited perfectly in that scene, up to Jess running and ending up going down into the basement. And then you see Peter's shadow. And I think up to this point, there is the question, because this movie is framed like a whodunit. And so the audience is thinking, wait, could it be Peter? Because in this moment, they're totally into the scene. They're not really doing the math of the movie, so to speak, and thinking, oh, wait, it couldn't be Peter because of this, or whatever. They're just so locked into what's going on that they give themselves over to the movie, and whatever happens, happens. And you get the payoff because after that, we realize that Jess has killed Peter, her boyfriend, with the fire stoker. And then one of my favorite camera shots. you got the camera just sitting there in the doorway, and you see Jess. She's kind of knocked out. You got John Saxon standing over her, and we never cut away. The scene actually feels like it lasts forever, and then eventually it just pulls back, and it pans over the hallway and then up to the attic, and then we see Billy, who is still alive. So then, you get the payoff. Bob Clark is telling you he's still alive. Billy is still alive. What a freaking genius movie. I absolutely adore Black Christmas so much. The legacy of this movie continues to live on. I constantly see people bringing it up every year. It's an annual watch. I think it's my #1 Christmas movie that I have to watch every year. And I think The Chef's Kiss is watching it at the witching hour on Christmas morning, like 3 a.m. Christmas morning. That is the best time to watch Black Christmas. But it doesn't hurt to watch it just at night on Christmas Eve. But it's just wild to me that so many people didn't even know much about this movie. And I would bet that a lot of you discovered this movie from the 25 Years of Terror documentary for Halloween, when they actually mentioned Black Christmas. And I remember watching that documentary and then having to like stop and rewind, because I was like, whoa, what is that movie they're talking about? Black Christmas? Because they just kind of breeze right over it, which is kind of suspicious. That documentary introduced me to Black Christmas, and it made me want to reach out and watch the movie, find it and watch it. Let me know in the comments how you discovered the movie, because I would bet a lot of you found it the same way I did. But for a rating for the original Black Christmas, I am definitely giving it a unicorn. I have not given a unicorn in years, and it felt good to finally give this movie the rating that it deserves, a unicorn. Black Christmas is so freaking iconic. And I want to hear your stories about Black Christmas in the comments. It's just, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It really is. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Not just horror movies, movies. So that's my revisited for Black Christmas 1974. Again, rest in peace, John Saxon, Margot Kidder, Olivia Hussey, Bob Clark, and my little Levi. Also, guys, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. We do FIFA Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on my socials, Premium Patreon, become a channel member, buy me a coffee. And you guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and Drumdum out. Felt good to say that again.